Well, the Super Bowl is coming up, and for those of us in the United States, it's a time to look forward to some great commercials, some questionable entertainment at halftime, and most importantly, a battle between two of the best teams in football. But did you know that this year marks the 50th anniversary of the very first Super Bowl? For starters, the game was played in Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, which only seats about 90,000 people. And according to some accounts, there were more people in attendance at the Rose Parade that day than at the game. More than a third of all American TV households tuned in to watch the game, which was more than double the audience of the previous NFL championship game. And that got us thinking, how many households in America today don't have a TV? Do people still watch the Super Bowl without a TV? Does anyone not have a TV? Are people still watching the Super Bowl? Also, back in 1967, there was no such thing as a Super Bowl party. Today, it's hard to find a ticket for less than a few $100s, especially if you want to go to the game in person. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. But back in the day, tickets were so cheap that some fans actually complained about having to pay $12 for one. To put that in perspective, $12 in 1967 is the equivalent of about $85 today. But you could still buy a decent seat for less than $100. You know what else cost $100? Getting me to shut up about the 70s. In fact, most folks had never even heard of a TV remote control, so they had to get up off the couch to change the channel. How barbaric. And if you didn't know that, don't worry, because no one else did either until just now. Now, while we were brushing off our 1970s porn stash to better understand the cultural zeitgeist of the era, we stumbled upon some things that might surprise you about the very first Super Bowl. Like, for example, it was called something else. Yeah, when the American Football League and the National Football Conference merged in 1966 to form what we today call the NFL, they decided that in order to celebrate their coming together, the Green Bay Packers won 35-10 against the Kansas City Chiefs. And if that score sounds oddly similar to another Super Bowl, well, that's because it is. These days, teams tend to be a lot more evenly matched, which makes for a closer game. But back then, the Packers were widely considered the best team in the NFL, having gone undefeated in the regular season. In fact, they were so good that the first Super Bowl was essentially seen as a one-team affair with the other teams just there to make up the numbers. And sure enough, the Packers won the next two Super Bowls as well. It wouldn't be until 1970 that another team, the Kansas City Chiefs, would finally win the big game. They would hold a championship game at the end of every season for the teams who won their respective conferences. The very first game was held on January 15th, 1967, and was originally called the AFL World Championship Game. It was until the second Super Bowl that they realized how long that name was and changed it to the Super Bowl, though we have to admit that calling it the AFL World Championship Game does sound like a mouthful. It also sounds like the worst part of a bad 70s porn flick. And speaking of that era, you're probably not surprised to hear that the first Super Bowl was not nearly as big a deal as it is today. The biggest complaint people had about the first Super Bowl is that it just wasn't very exciting. But despite its shortcomings, the first Super Bowl was a ratings hit. Anyway, one thing that was hot in 1967 was the price of admission. So if you want to learn more about the world, just click right over here and subscribe.